At B Marcello on Twitter. You read him at 24/7 Sports. See a lot of good video there. B Marcello as well. He's with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. What's up, Brandon? How are you?
What's up, guys?
Man, we're just hanging out, getting ready for the rematch, which it's kind of weird. It didn't seem inevitable until that day in Atlanta. Then it felt really inevitable at that point. But up until then, this is not one of those where everybody's like, hey, Bama and Georgia, they're going to play for this thing at the end.
Yeah, I mean, listen, a lot of people were saying, and I was leaning into it, that this was that this team right now for Alabama might be the worst or second worst, quote unquote, Alabama team to reach the national championship game. But having said that, I mean, we talk about being the worst in something, being the worst in the national championship game among all these elite Alabama teams we've had over the last decade is saying something. So, yeah, this after that day in Atlanta, the SEC championship game, you just knew this was inevitable. I thought Michigan was maybe the only team that matched up well with Georgia to potentially knock them off and maybe bring us a different type of matchup, but we ended up seeing what we saw.
Yesterday marked the 15th anniversary of Nick Saban arriving in Tuscaloosa. What's more amazing to you, the fact that Nick Saban has been in Tuscaloosa 15 years, or the fact that he's going for national championship number 7 on Monday?
That he's going for his 7th national championship at Alabama. It's insane. You guys talk about, I'm sure, every day, but he's the best coach ever. I don't think there's any doubt about that in my mind, and trying to hear anybody argue against that and even compare him to Bear Bryant right now. You can't compare him to Bear Bryant. It's two different eras, and I'm sorry, but this era is much more difficult to win a national championship. And so, like, winning 7 national titles for Nick Saban is almost like winning maybe 12 or 11, whatever. You have to extrapolate that to me in that old era of Bear Bryant. It's insane, and we'll never see anything like it again unless, who knows what this college football look like in 25 years. We might be in a smaller system with less teams, so maybe it can be matched then, but I don't see anything at this level ever happening again.
Different college football in 25 years. Brandon, there's a good chance it'll be different college football in 25 minutes or days. It's moving fast.
I've got I got a split screen right now. I'm looking at you guys, and then I've got my tweet deck open, because I don't know what's going to happen. Someone will enter the portal, or a team's going to leave for the NFL. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll tell you the best. First off, we don't talk about Nick Saban every day, which surprises people, but there's nothing else to say. It would be a pretty boring show if we talked about Nick Saban every day, because there's nothing else to say about the guy.
You should just do a picture-in-picture for your show where you just list Nick Saban's accomplishments with some video highlights over and over and over again.
We started naming who should win the SEC or the Nick Saban Award, the SEC Coach of the Year every year, because Nick Saban could win it every year. We just, to make it a more interesting poll, take him out of it. Other than Nick Saban, other than Alabama, we do that all the time. I was going to say the best thing you do right now on social media, I think, is on your Instagram feed, where you just send snapshots of your tweets, because oftentimes I will go into a store or go in to have lunch or go into the production room, and I'll come out and I'll hit your story, and 7 things have happened since I've been doing that, and you've got them all listed there. The Caleb Williams leaving Oklahoma. If you're leaving UCF to go to UCLA, or if you're leaving any other school to go somewhere else, I understand it. But where are you leaving Oklahoma to go if you're a quarterback? I mean, Kyler, Baker, Jalen, they're all in the NFL. Where are you going? I don't understand this.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately he should land at USC. Listen, he went to Oklahoma because of Lincoln Riley and that offense. And, but we've been hearing here that he's pretty open to a lot of schools right now. And one school that he's very interested in, surprisingly, and our Brandon Huffman at 24/7 Sports broke this last night, UCLA could be in the mix. So talk about UCLA maybe actually coming out on top in all of this, because I was saying last night on Twitter, it's almost like UCLA is caught in this firefight between USC and Oklahoma, and they're catching some stray bullets. Goodness gracious, we're not doing anything, and you take Dylan Gabriel away from us, and Chip Kelly might not still be safe, guys. And you got USC with Lincoln Riley in town, across town now. It's It's kind of insane. But yeah, Caleb Williams is going to be interesting to watch. I think he ends up at USC. That just makes sense to me. But UCLA is in the mix, and he's open to anybody. He's listening. He's listening to all takers. And, listen, in this era of NIL, I mean, I don't think money is really going to be an issue for him. Wherever he goes, he'll be able to do a great NIL deal because it'll be more national than regional. But you never know. Well, I mean, who's to say if, Georgia doesn't step up all of a sudden here in the next 24 hours and, a businessman in Georgia goes, hey, well, I'll work out a deal for you for, $2 million or whatever. And it's like, oh, that changes things. But that's the other thing. Georgia was someone that a school that a lot of people just assumed was going to be in the mix. And we're told at 24/7 Sports via Rusty Manziel, that's not the case. Georgia's not in it right now. So all signs to me seem to be pointing toward USC.
Brandon Marcello is with us at @BMarcello on Twitter. Jim mentioned Instagram. You can follow him on Instagram at Brandon Marcello. He's on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. I want to rewind just a second in that comment you just had where you said Chip Kelly might still not be safe or whatever. What that sounded rather ominous. What did you mean by that?
I believe his buyout goes down here in less than 2 weeks now. Administration's not too happy with him right now. And also John Wilner, an amazing reporter out west, the best Pac-12 reporter there is, reported, I believe, 2 or 3 days ago, right around the new year, that he was starting to hear some rumblings there and that he's not exactly safe, and to keep your eye on that something could happen. And he pinpointed that date, and it's sometime in mid-January, and something to watch. Listen, the AD there, that's not Chip Kelly's guy, and I'm not so sure that they're always on the same page and kind of see what the same future for UCLA. So something to watch. Listen, we always get some type of surprise, especially these last 3 or 4 years, some type of surprise in like January or February we weren't expecting with the coaching carousel. And this could be it. I mean, listen, I'm not hearing like anything's imminent, but I just think that there's not a lot of, I don't think people are just sitting there, laying back going, okay, everything's fine. I think a lot of people are twiddling their thumbs trying to think about what exactly is the best move to make here.
Brandon, we were talking about Alabama and the dominant program. If there was a number 2, it was Clemson, and now Dabo's coming for the first time in 8 years, 3 losses or more. He's lost his AD, he's lost his offensive coordinator, he's lost his defensive coordinator, he's lost his assistant head coach, he's lost his director of player development and external affairs. Is this the beginning of the end for Dabo? I mean, what do you read into what's going on right now in Clemson?
Yeah, you mentioned it. It's fascinating to me to see Alabama and Clemson and the different ways they've handled all this success. Nick Saban, it seems like every 2 years he's dealing with massive turnover and on his staff. But then he goes out and hires amazing coaches and seems to just keep it going, if not get better. And Nick Saban's also been willing to challenge himself and also say, hey, I'm open to new ideas and changing the way I go about things, but still having the same framework that Nick Saban's always had. Whereas at Clemson with Dabo Swinney, it's been about having the familiar around you. He's had the same type of guys around him, the same coaches, same developmental guys. And so he loses a few of them this year, and you almost felt like it was going to happen one way or another. You lose Brent Venables and Tony Elliott, both now head coaches, and your OC and DC. That was an opportunity for him, not to necessarily say take a page out of Nick Saban's book, but when you're right there side by side with Alabama, you wonder, okay, are these two programs similar because they are similar? Well, Dabo says, I'm just going to go with what's familiar. He ends up just elevating guys within his own staff to take over those 2 big spots. And this is going to be the case study for Clemson. Is sticking with the familiar, is that what's made Dabo Swinney so successful? Or are we in a point here, a pivot point, where he needs to change and evolve with the times, and he's not willing to do so? And this is maybe the beginning of the end for him, where we start seeing this thing start ticking down over these next few years. I don't know which way, and anybody that says they do is crazy, but this will be the moment we'll make or break Dabo Swinney, not necessarily his legacy, but one where we could see whether this is not just a dynasty, but something that is just a Dabo Swinney, a byproduct of him and the way he builds a staff, or was this because of he took advantage of the time period he was in with some great elite coaches, and then they left, and he wasn't able to keep it going. The one thing really for him, in addition to this, is the recruiting. They've kind of pride themselves on, listen, we're going to give our coaches a lot of time off in the spring and summertime. We're not going to bring kids on campus, during the spring. We're going to focus on us. And it almost made Clemson kind of like this diamond in the rough in a lot of ways, where kids, you kind of the heart, whatever that saying is, I'm really dumb. Whether the heart covets or whatever, what it can't see or whatever. Anyway, but that's kind of what, but that's kind of what Clemson had become to a lot of recruits, because Clemson was winning titles, and not just national titles, but ACC titles every year. And it made it so interesting. They're building new stuff on campus, but they weren't bringing kids on campus to visit as often as other schools were. So I think a lot of that kind of put a lot of mystique around Clemson. But now we're in an era with the transfer portal and being immediately eligible to transfer, that you don't necessarily have to go to Clemson right away to win a championship. You can go elsewhere, check it out. And if you're a high school kid and Clemson's telling you, well, you're not going to be able to visit us in the spring, if you're a kid, that might actually turn you off more now than it did, say, 3 years ago. Because now you'd be like, okay, well, I've got these other schools that want me, and I can go play right away. And, a year or two from now, if you still want me, Clemson, maybe I'll end up coming there. They've got more options now. And be interested to see if Clemson changes the way it does business in recruiting. I would think maybe not, just based solely off of the way Dabo Swinney has decided just to go with the familiar with his coaching hires.
I wanted to see if his name is mentioned 7 days from now, when there are 9 or 10 NFL openings too. We're a week away from the NFL having a lot of openings, and maybe his name is in a mix down in Jacksonville or someplace like that. We won't hold you to this prediction. Just quick gut. My gut is Georgia wins on Monday night. Do you have a gut feeling on a rematch scenario? I lived it in 2011, covering Alabama in the game of the century, and it feels a lot like that. That game was big in Atlanta. Alabama beat them. Now Alabama's got to beat them twice. That seems hard to do.
I've waffled on this like 12 times just since, yesterday. But I'd say Georgia. And from talking to people close to the Georgia program, in the immediate aftermath of the SEC championship game, and even about a week and a half ago, they thought that they just had a bad game plan defensively going against Alabama, and they tweaked it a little bit at halftime, but they realized they messed up in the way they attacked Alabama's receivers and the way they attacked Bryce Young. They thought that they could rotate that defensive line, wear them out a little bit, take advantage of some of those quote-unquote weaknesses on the Alabama front. But Alabama not only did a great job blocking, keeping them at bay, but they moved guys around, and that affected the way Georgia was able to do things and just rely on their defensive front. And they realized that, their cornerbacks and safeties, that teams like Cincinnati, for example, and others, where you play some press man and get up in the face of the Alabama receivers, that can have some success. Well, Georgia doesn't have a lot of confidence in those guys, and they went in that game in the SEC championship, and you could tell they didn't, because they didn't really try to put those guys on an island or go one-on-one with those receivers of Alabama. If Georgia's going to beat Alabama, everybody's going to talk about the defensive line. Alabama is the only way to really slow them down is to get in those receivers' faces, and Georgia's got to put more confidence into those cornerbacks. Can they do it? Do they have the confidence to do that? I don't know. And so it comes down to coaching in a big game like this, and who's better than Saban and what he does with that staff?
So here I am waffling now. You just waffled again.
Listen, Georgia is more talented at more spots and deeper, but just barely. And Alabama's got the greatest coach of all time, and I don't know. I'm going to go with Georgia. It's difficult to beat a team twice, and I think Georgia will make – listen, that game, we forget this, like late in the first quarter of that SEC championship game, maybe I'm getting my times wrong here, that seemed like a game like Georgia was like, oh, Georgia's still going to win this, or Georgia's going to still take advantage of some things here. You'd see some openings, and then Alabama just jumped on them, and Georgia can't play catch up. And But if Georgia can do what it did really in that first quarter of that SEC championship game again and not fumble the ball or do anything like that, and if I know this is all ifs and ifs, but also Stetson Bennett missed a couple of passes downfield that would have changed that game too. Very difficult for those same type of issues to pop up in a second game. In addition to that, again, I think they will make those adjustments because that game plan was bad defensively against Alabama in the first half. Yeah, for right now, I'll go with Georgia. And listen, guys, you guys have probably said this too. I know I'm rambling, so stop me. But if Georgia doesn't win the national championship this year, when will they under Kirby Smart? I don't think they will. This is the year for them to do it. This is the best team Kirby Smart's had there. This will probably be the best team they'll ever have there, if we're going to be quite honest. And as I mentioned earlier, is this maybe the worst, quote unquote, Alabama team in the national championship game? So if you're Kirby Smart and you're sitting there, you got your best team you've ever had, and you're going against maybe the worst or second worst Alabama team to beat a national championship, and you can't win the national championship still if you're Georgia, when the hell are you going to win it?
Kirby,
I don't think they win it.
Kirby with all the pressure in the world on him, that normally goes well for Kirby.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
That's when he's at his best. He does his best work there. All right, Brandon Marcello is on Twitter, at BMarcello, 24/7 Sports. Is where you read him. You can also find him on Instagram, as Jim mentioned, at Brandon Marcello. Brandon, wonderful stuff, man. Thank you so much for the time.
All right, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Brandon with us on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.